Today I've got three topics to talk to you about. All three are about the main three titans of console gaming in particular. So Microsoft, Sony, and Nintendo. All three of them have either had some form of controversy or some form of news relating to other bits and pieces. So I thought I'd do a little video, discuss my thoughts and opinions on some of the stuff that's been happening, and then also give you some of my thoughts on some other extra details as well. Now the first thing that we're actually going to start off with today, and I am absolutely massive over in this section here, so there you go, we've made me a little bit smaller, but the first thing that I want to talk about is Sony's reversal of what was a bit of backlash, to say the least, which is basically that Helldivers 2 had a thing put into it, or at least was going to have a thing incorporated into it where, you know, PSN was going to be required to be used. Now if you're in the Discord at all, you would have known my opinion, which is that, one, it's kind of Sony's choice. It's a crappy choice and so on, that it's stopping other people from playing. But I do think generally, in my opinion, a lot of the internet was basically just internet backlash, where it is like pretty much the typical form of it's a very slow news week, so it's jumping on something. Was the things kind of bad? Yeah, 100%. Is it a good thing they've reversed it? Possibly. Most likely it is in terms of pro-consumerism. However, I was really surprised that Sony were going to do this. Anyone who knows anything about Sony over the last 2 decades, they aren't exactly the most pro-consumer company. They pretty much are like the Apple of gaming. They do whatever they want. They don't really listen to any form of their consumers' opinions. They just kind of go, we know what's best, you're going to accept it, and that's pretty much it. Now, they chose to reverse this. They said, Helldivers fans, we've heard your feedback on the Helldivers 2 account linking update. The May 6th update, which would have required Steam and PlayStation Network account linking for new players and for current players being May 30th, will not be moving forward. We're still learning what is best for PC players, and your feedback has been invaluable. Thanks again for continued support for Helldivers 2 and the updates in terms of future plans, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, in terms of what's happened here, Sony has effectively been pushed into the, yes, you're going to accept that we do not want this. Now, where this comes from for a lot of people is a few different things. One is that people were worried about the idea of Sony having their details, because Sony has had many different attacks when it comes to leaked information. For me, personally, when people were telling me this, I do agree with you that that is an issue. However, one, I don't think that is the reason people care so much, because that was kind of like one reason. The other reason was people didn't like the idea that other people couldn't play the game, and those were kind of like the two main opinions. The third really is like what I think is the actual reason, which is people just don't want to have to put in more details for another thing. They don't want another account for something else. I think that's the actual root issue. But those two other issues are effectively the argumentation that gets used to kind of protect that first main issue that sounds like a lot lesser of a issue to have to deal with. Like, if I was saying to someone, I don't want this done because I can't be asked to have to put my details in, sounds kind of weak. But if I say, I don't want this because, one, I don't want to have to put my details in, but also, other people can't play the game. And on top of that, Sony have loads of account leaking issues where people's personal data goes all over the place. It's just basically some extra things that I don't think people truly care about that much. The reason why I say they don't truly care about it is that, really, everyone's data has basically been sold to living hell either by the companies directly or through leaks from every other company under the sun. But also, Sony makes sense for why they are targeted as heavily as they are. They are the biggest in terms of the console wars. They won, as Xbox said, within their lawsuit, so it's not really a surprise that they're targeted as heavily as they are. The next area I'm going to be discussing is going to be Microsoft and the closures that they've done in regards to Bethesda's Arcane Austin, AlphaDog Games, and Tango Games Works. Now, in terms of GameWorks, in terms of it, I'm going to give you some of my takes in terms of my general overview. But yeah, in terms of it, Arcane Austin, in terms of the games that they've made, for anyone wondering, so they've helped with things like Dishonored. I believe that they aren't the ones who actually made the Dishonored games, or aren't the primary ones. Then we've also got the fact that they worked on Prey, and then Redfall was their primary thing that they're most well known for, and obviously it wasn't exactly received very well. And a lot of people are very upset that obviously all these people are losing their jobs. That's mainly the first upset. But then the other one is that they've closed all of these studios, and a lot of people are upset. Particularly people are upset about Tango Games Works in particular. The other two, people don't seem to be as interested. A lot of people are saying that they should have been given a second chance and whatnot in regards to it. The main real thing with a lot of this is that the tech industry right now isn't exactly in fit shape. Tango Games Works, though, are the main one that people are kind of upset about, because they made made Ghostwire Tokyo, Hi-Fi Rush, both 2 games that are on Game Pass and are received amazingly well. Then The Evil Within and The Evil Within 2, both again 2 games that are received amazingly well. People love those games. And people are upset about the fact that these studios have been closed entirely. Now, the reason for this, in terms of it, is going to be the pretty typical response, which is they are cutting because they need to hit budgets and so on. That's probably the main reason. And a lot of people are upset because they feel as if these studios shouldn't be just getting removed when these companies are making record profits and whatnot. My general take is that I believe that it sucks for these people to be losing their jobs. I believe that more things like unionization within gaming industry and the tech industry in general should happen to try and stop a lot of this just from happening as badly as it is, or at least way more responsibility should be used on like these companies' fronts of like, okay, look a year or 2 in advance and be honest with the people you're working with, instead of just, you know, randomly one day going, yeah, so after a lot of consideration, we've decided that Arcane Austin, yeah, we need to cut you out because you haven't returned us too much of a profit after all of our investments. But also, you know, even though we forced you to make some of the games that didn't do well, yeah, you're going because we can't afford you anymore. And we need to hit these certain targets. Now, again, I do think publishers get a bit too much criticism. In my opinion, I think a lot of people do like to blame them because it's basically the same argumentation that gets used for everything, which is these bad big people who have all the money are bad, and we need to protect the little guys, and that's kind of the main argumentation that gets used by a lot of people. However, generally speaking, I do think in this instance it is kind of sad to see that people have lost their jobs. I just hope that people don't do their typical thing, which is like complaining as if this is just a one-person thing. A lot of people are complaining specifically about Xbox and Microsoft in particular, obviously owned by Microsoft. Again, this is happening all over the tech industry. It's not just a Microsoft or gaming industry thing. All of these studios, all of these companies, everything like that within the tech sector have been leaning up because they're probably unsure of what the future of gaming and really the wider world is over the next decade. Then we've got the final one, which is the Switch 2. I recently saw this. I decided, very bad timing I guess, but I decided to pick up a OLED Switch. I really like the look of it, it's really nice. I haven't used it too much, but I'm looking to finally actually play the Zelda games, as I've owned Breath of the Wild for a while. I just haven't ever gotten around to playing it. And yeah, I was like, you know what, I said to myself a year and a half ago that I would get this OLED Switch, and I never did. And yeah, literally the day after I get this Switch, I see online that, yeah, the successor of the Switch will be announced within the fiscal year, which basically just means that it will be announced by the end of this financial year. So April of next year will be the minimum threshold. I wouldn't be surprised if this gets announced either near the end of this year or early next year and gets sold, basically starting a few months after that, most likely, or basically near the end of the year, something along those lines. But one thing that I did think was pretty interesting is that you've got on here, for example, with IGN's post, which says, which features are you finding most important, basically, which is 1080p handheld resolution, backwards compatibility, larger screens, improved Joy-Cons, 4K docked resolution. Now, in my opinion, I've said this before in like other videos in the past, a long time ago when I was making this sort of video for the main channel, which is, you know what, the dock should do way more. This thing should basically do what loads of like, I remember a while ago, I don't know if there's still a big thing, but you could effectively get which was effectively like a GPU that you could plug directly into your PC and have as like a, not as good as a normal GPU, but it gave you some form of boost in terms of your game's ability to play games, but your PC's ability to play games, or your laptop or whatnot, or you could even do things like cloud usage and so on. I feel like the dock should have something on board that means the moment you plug this in, this thing can get closer and closer to being competitive with other consoles. Now, obviously, it depends on how profitable or how much of a loss leader this is for them and how much they want to be more of a loss leader. But they could keep the OLED Switch, keep the original Switch, have the Switch 2 as something that's price ranged to like 400, 500, compete with actual consoles where when it's actually docked, it is something on par with, let's say, a Xbox Series S or something like that, where you have a load of features that allow people to play 4K docked resolution and so on. Now, I do think 1080p is probably a big deal. I think the fact that we're still at 720p with a lot of these things isn't particularly great. Like, let's just see, is the OLED Switch 1080p or not? Let's find out. No. The answer is no on that. Yeah, so the OLED Switch is 720p handheld and then 1080p on the dock. And that's a bit sad to see, obviously. We would like to see far better resolution. To me, to be honest though, like with the actual OLED display itself, even though it's 720p, I wouldn't have thought it's 720p. It looks way better than you would expect. And hopefully we see those two major updates. I don't really care about having a larger display. I think the OLED Switch has a really good display in terms of its bezel size. I would like to see the Joy-Cons improve. I hate these things. Like the thing that I despise the most is that it's just not ergonomic for your hand. Like the fact that it sits in your hand like this and just digs in, and like you're having, like, my thumb just sits way too much over it. And I haven't got exactly like massive hands. Like it's not like it's like I'm just towering over the thing. It's nothing like that. So I would like to see some improvements to the Joy-Con, better displays and whatnot. But yeah, that's everything in terms of the first proper video in a while on this channel. Hopefully you guys did enjoy. I do want to talk about more stuff, either like news related to games or just general topics. I am thinking of doing some videos about companies like Bethesda, Ubisoft, and news announcements around those games that are coming out and so on. Kind of doing what I used to do on the Exiled channel before I made it video essay games only. But yeah, with that all being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like, do subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Let's find the stop recording button, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a good one.